Hey everybody, Jacob Patrick here, and welcome to the first ever segment on the Backroom Show called I Screwed Up and I'm Sorry. Today's episode, or this week's episode, is without video. We misplaced the video. We recorded video and we misplaced the video. I don't know where it went. No use crying over spilled milk. It's gone. So instead, you get to see the little graphic thingy with our little cartoons over on, I guess, this side, and the waveforms and stuff, like the old school before we broke out the camera. 3 episodes ago, way back then. So anyway, enjoy the episode.
Red buttons record?
I think so.
I think so. When the red light's on, don't come into the recording room.
Are you sure it's recording? Because
yeah.
Because if you're not sure, I can't be sure from across the table.
No, that's when I have when the red light's on.
Okay.
That's recording.
Good. We don't want to have to do this again.
No, I'm pretty sure.
No redos, no takesy backsies.
Yeah.
Shut up and sit down.
So, Jonathan.
Jacob.
You know what we're talking about today?
Yeah, you just told me.
Storytelling. You were supposed to say, no, what are we talking about today?
I'm sorry. No, Jacob, I have no idea, but I'm very, very intrigued.
Where's your script? Did you lose your script? No, that's right. We're going to talk about storytelling today. So, welcome to the Backroom Show. This is the Back Room. We're the Backroom Buddies. And there's no telling what could happen from here on out. We are both wearing pants today, so that's an improvement. God. We were always wearing pants.
When you say backroom buddies and pants in the same sentence, there's something drastically wrong with that statement.
I'm so changing the name of our YouTube channel to Backroom Buddies instead of Wright and Patrick.
Well, at least it's not Pajama Party.
Pajama Party. That's right. All right, so storytelling. Story is very important, I think, to all of mankind. To the whole history of who we are as humans. Story is an integral part, right? Think about it. The best photographs usually tell a story. The best paintings, the best songs, the most popular songs tell some kind of story. Most of what we consume as entertainment involves a story, whether it's just a little mobile game on our app, a big movie, Hollywood blockbuster movie, TV shows, Netflix, documentaries. They're not just giving facts, they're telling a story.
Yeah. Even in big business.
Yeah.
If you want to start a business, there's a story behind it. If you want to invest in the stock market, there's a story behind it.
Yeah.
A story goes a long way in building a brand, building a name. So storytelling is extremely important in every aspect of life, really.
The most successful commercials
Absolutely.
on TV and radio tell a story. We are in love with story.
Yeah.
And we consume story just as much as we possibly can. We look for any excuse to tell a story or to consume a story, right? Which is pretty interesting. Even who we are. I read a book recently. The point of this book wasn't about this, but it was just a point in the book. How we define who we are by the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So we've had all these experiences through our lives. And to be realistic, there's so many experiences, we couldn't possibly remember them all or view them all as equally important. So what we do is we kind of scrub through all the experiences, in our lives, and we choose the stories that we deem as more valuable or more important. And we kind of string those stories together to create an explanation as to who we are and why we are the way we are.
Yeah.
We could just as easily choose other stories, but we choose the ones that we feel are most important for us. And we base ourselves now on those stories. right? And so even sometimes a psychologist may help a patient to rethink the kind of person they are by helping them to see, well, you aren't defined by this thing that happened. What about this thing, and this thing? If you focus on those, you retell your story and you become a different person, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's you and I talked about this well, I guess we could say off camera this week. And we were talking about, even with my poetry, it's when I look at my poetry, what I published, I love my poetry because I understand the story behind it.
Yeah.
A lot of people might just read my poetry. They might read my poetry and just think, okay, well, that's a great poem, but it doesn't generate anything specific, or it doesn't conjure up an image, a time, a date, a place. But for me, it does. Tells a story, right? And I was mentioning to you before we started writing my books, which you helped me with. I mentioned to you that I didn't have any titles on my poetry. None of my poetry ever had a title. And that was kind of the way that I wanted to keep my poetry. It morphed into what it is today. But when people read my poetry, I didn't have a title because I wanted people to think about how that poem told a story to them. What kind of story through images did that poem tell them? Now that it has a title, it kind of directs that poetry to a specific image, whereas without a title, it kind of leaves that poem, you can interpret it to the way that you feel. So then it becomes your story.
Yeah, sure, sure. Leaving it up to interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, with one of your books, Ages, the original concept that we were kind of thinking about for that was to include like a little story with each of the poems.
Yeah, that was
maybe not all of them,
original. But, it was based. Well, Ages is based on this micro. You could say a biography, a memoir.
Yeah, sure.
And so I was going to write a poem and include the story behind it. But we published the book differently than what I was originally planning on doing.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think some of those poems would be more powerful if people knew the stories that were behind them or led up to them?
Yeah.
Be more meaningful to people? Yeah,
I think so. And I'm not necessarily saying that it would be maybe more meaningful to every single person, but I know that within storytelling, a lot of those poems, if I ever read them and told the story behind them, I know that my family would just love it, because in Ages, that's basically the idea.
Yeah.
But the other idea of telling a story behind my poems, and not every one, some are quite deeply personal, very emotional, because that was the time and the place for me. But some of them may just draw people into a circumstance that they may have experienced in their life. Something that where they may feel a deep connection with me as the poet. And so now they have their time, their circumstance that might arrive from that poem.
Like they may have had a similar experience, or a different experience that kind of impacted them in a similar way for whatever reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Some emotional trigger, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. So even your poems have stories behind them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every single one. Yeah.
So we're just surrounded by story.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking a lot about story, and then a lot about being a storyteller.
Yeah.
We talked about this because actually it was because of a show that we did a few episodes back. We talked about marketing and branding. We did a part 1. Maybe at some point we should go back to a part 2 to continue that. I'll have to re-listen to the episode to remember where we left off. But we did talk about how in order to build like that personal brand, one of the aspects of a successful brand, according to that book that we were discussing, is for you to have like a motto. And it wasn't, the word wasn't motto. I think it was creed.
Yeah.
For you to have a personal creed.
Personal creed.
In other words, a word or a group of words, a phrase that defines you as a brand. Right. And of course, that applies to a company like Nike has Just Do It,
absolutely,
et cetera.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about a personal brand because we're people. We're not building a corporation. We want to build a personal brand as creators.
Absolutely.
And we thought about, well, what would be our brand? If you're an author or a poet, other than just your creed being, I'm an author, I'm a poet. It needs to be something more specific, more unique, something that captures attention, and a kind of a personal identity. And so we were kicking around ideas, and even from that episode, I was recently re-listening to it. I mentioned right then from the beginning that something I had kind of been chewing on was this idea of building a brand around being a storyteller.
Yeah.
And then using your creed, your credo, or your motto being, let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
And so, I was chewing on that, trying to figure out how that might work. And as we were talking about how to better position our branding with this show and with the channel, and what exactly are we doing here, and what are we telling people about ourselves, and what's the end goal here? Because we enjoy just sitting here doing the back room, and this is definitely personal brand, because there's intangible parts of a brand too, like parts that you can't articulate, just about a person and the way they are and the way they feel.
Yeah.
We're accomplishing that already. Just doing this every week, being ourselves and goofing off, we're accomplishing that. But the side of the brand that you do articulate, we spent some time talking about it, and I re-brought up that idea, being a storyteller.
Yeah.
And we're kind of trying to build that as a dual personal brand.
Yeah.
That would probably be more powerful because we both would be doing it together, and kind of create the reputation of being storytellers.
Yeah.
So I write novels. Obviously, the stories I write, that makes me a storyteller. But more than that, the poetry you write has stories behind it. So being the person that can tell, being an oral storyteller, being able to tell those stories. Not every storyteller is someone who can write beautiful prose, but someone who can just sit and tell an engaging story that can bring somebody to laughter or to tears or to whatever. That's very powerful. And then us doing this in front of the camera and telling stories here and now, that's very powerful. And so, we started chewing on that, and that's kind of where we're wanting to go, is building a brand of being storytellers. And part of that is just, you're welcome on the journey with us, where you got to learn to be better oral storytellers.
Yep.
That's not something that we claim today, in April of, are we in April? April of 2019, whenever we are.
We are in April.
Today, we don't claim to be the world's best oral storytellers. No. So we're going to be learning and studying how to do that, and practicing and using this channel, the show, podcast, and other shows and podcasts to develop those skills and practice them. Do you know somebody personally, maybe from your family or someone you grew up with, that was just a fantastic storyteller? Oral storyteller.
Yeah. Well, I remember that my grandfather on my dad's side was a great storyteller. He used to keep us entertained
with funny stories from his youth.
Very, very funny stories. And he was very good that way. But another person is he's not a young friend, but he's younger than I am. But he's a very good friend by the name of Curtis Kirk, and he can lay him down. He can get you cracking up pretty good. Yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good, and so he can get you laughing pretty good. And So, you just, I haven't tried to, imitate, a good storyteller, because I feel that my way of telling a story is a little bit different.
Sure, yeah.
Because mine comes from personal experience. And most of my stories, of course, are from my family. They're about my dad. They're, about my brothers and sisters. Some of them are about my trips, different things like that. But you can learn how to be a very natural storyteller.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've gotten from those two individuals, is just to become a natural storyteller.
Yeah, it's really a gift. We have a mutual friend, Ron, older guy, very good at telling stories, personal stories, things that he did as a child or as an older man, whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're just interesting. But he's very good at telling a story and captivating you with the way he tells a story. A guy we both met yesterday, Pete, really good at telling. He told this story about a giant worm, and it's captivating, and you want to hear more. And I went out to eat with him last night, and he was telling us these crazy stories, and you could just tell you could tell that he had never written down the story. He didn't have like a checklist of details, but you could tell that just from the way it was so refined, you knew he had told that story dozens or hundreds of times.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what details and what voices and what looks and what positions it was an art.
Yeah.
It was an art and a science, and he knew it. He had it down pat. That story just rocked in the way that he told it. And it was, by the way, the story was so unbelievable. I don't even know. I can't even tell if it was true, if he's pulling our leg, how much of it was true. It didn't even matter. It was just, it was entertaining for sure, because you're kind of in shock for most of it. But, I admire people. And like you said, it's not how he did it and then I'm going to copy everything that he does, right? But it's taking people who are excellent storytellers. A lot of stand-up comics are very good story. Yeah. That's what most bits in a comic, a comic act is a series of stories. Not always. The comedians do different things, but my favorite personally are when
that's true.
When Jerry Seinfeld tells a story about his childhood, you don't even know if it's true or not. And like he'll tell you, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's true. Yeah. What matters is it makes you laugh. Yeah. And the way he tells it, he's got every detail and everything so precisely planned. And of course, it's not just he wrote it, but it's that he does it before audience after audience after audience. By the time you've told it 1,000 times, you know exactly how to tell that story, and it's beautiful.
Very true.
Awesome, right? And I think about that. I'd like to be able to say that, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll have that skill to tell a story in that way. Yeah. It would be fantastic. It'd be amazing.
Well, and you have to realize too is that, as I've mentioned to you before, many times, and as you know, I have 12 brothers and sisters. I'm one of 13, and we have my father was not the kind of father that you'd want anyone to have to endure. But it's amazing how our stories of childhood have morphed into these most brilliant stories. Now, some of the things that happened that even when I tell my own personal stories, I'm sure that I'm stealing from Peter to pay Paul, because I've listened to my brother's renditions, my sister's renditions, and I've put those renditions all together.
Sure, absolutely.
So this amazing story of our life has morphed into this grandiose thing that when we get together with a family reunion or family get together, we are on the floor from start to finish laughing.
Wow.
Because we've morphed these into like a comedy act, really.
Sure.
It's just amazing. And so a lot of my a lot of my later poetry. So maybe not all of Ages, because Ages came from younger experiences. But The Dark Closet, other parts of those books.
Sure.
They've morphed from those stories.
Yeah.
Of my childhood.
Yeah.
And so you just become this amazing storyteller.
Yeah.
When you get in a relaxed situation or position with others, especially with your family.
And you said that you wanted to take your microphone and record some conversations with them to get all the facts right later about who remembers what and who says what, to kind of have that as material to tell a story later, to write something down for a poem, whatever it could be, right?
So be ready, family. The mic's coming home this summer.
That would be amazing. Yeah, and there's something to, like, for example, Pete last night told this story. So amazing. So I don't know if amazing is the right word, just weird. But it was definitely entertaining. And I go home and I open my computer and I just start typing every detail I remembered in the order of what details he gave.
Okay.
Trying to figure out, could I collect that story and then learn to tell it, not the same way he told it, but learn to tell, let me tell you about this guy named Pete and what he did.
And what he did, yeah.
And be able to make an entertaining story, collect that story. I'm very taken by the idea of the traveling storyteller, like the old days.
When you put me onto that in YouTube, that is literally what I want to become.
Yeah, I'm going to link that in the show notes.
You should link it.
Jazza, a YouTuber, made an animation a couple years ago now, I think. Beautiful. It's like 10 minutes long, 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
Beautiful story. Excellent job. As an artist and the animator, all that aspect was beautiful.
Yeah.
And he wrote it himself too, which is great. It rhymes. It's a poem, and it's about a traveling storyteller. It is. I think it's called the Tale Teller.
The Tale Teller.
I think it's called.
Yeah.
I'll definitely put a link to that.
Yeah. That
really
it's amazing. It really is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I just love the idea of this person who collects stories about the little orphan boy, and about the old woman at the corner, and about the witch doctor, and about the the village chief, and about the whatever, the fire, and about the invading army, and about the wolves or whatever. And this was a thing back in the day, before we had TV, before we had radio, before we even had printed books. Yeah. Because books had to be hand copied.
Yeah.
We partake of stories. We tell stories. So people would get around the fire at night, around the hearth or whatever it's called, and swap stories. That's what they would do. And if a person was a traveler, maybe they didn't start as a traveling storyteller. They started as the guy who sharpens knives. Yeah. But they pick up these stories from inn to inn. And before you know it, now they're getting their food and getting put up for the night just on the value of the stories they bring, the entertainment they bring.
Yeah.
And then you go back to like the Grimm tales, Aesop's fables. Many of those old tales, those old stories, also had a lesson, a moral.
Yeah.
They taught you something.
Yeah.
They warned children not to go into the woods, not to talk to strangers. They warned people about various things. And, that was another use of the story at that time. And, the Brothers Grimm, these guys, they traveled. They didn't write those stories. No. I mean, they physically wrote them, but they collected them. They were story collectors. So that's really something special. It's a skill. It's a skill you have to develop and you have to work on. But see, in the old days, people worked on it so much more easily because every night they were swapping stories because that was the only entertainment. There was no radio or nothing, right? So either you're getting drunk and singing songs, right?
One or the other.
Or you're telling stories.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or a combination of both.
Yeah.
This was the options for entertainment at the time. So people naturally got really good at it.
Yeah. And if you, well, I mean, just from my own personal experience, and even I've lost a large piece of this in my life as well. But when I go home and I visit my grandchildren and I visit my children, They're just on phones and iPads now. We don't tell stories like we used to.
No, it's a lost art.
It's a lost art because I can remember, being with my uncles, my aunts, my grandma, my grandpa. I mean, the stories were amazing. The life was amazing. And we've lost that part of our life now. We've lost that storytelling, and we've lost the ability to pass on the heritage of those stories.
Yeah.
But I know that when I'm at home, when I start to tell a story, my grandkids are mesmerized because they love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an art that really has to be developed again, redeveloped in the family. Because, I mean, I just look at my family and I mean, we can cut each other up for hours and just talk about absolutely nothing and just laugh about it, because you take one little memory and you just blow it up into a lifetime. It's amazing.
It becomes something amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is a dying art. And the fact that it can cut through the noise of, Twitter and Instagram, Facebook and Candy Crush and whatever else people are doing on their phones these days, it shows that it does have that power. So something is powerful about it. We're not using it and developing it enough, to make it something as powerful as it used to be. And it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I personally want to spend more time when I'm with mixed groups of people around a meal or something, and just say, okay, who has a story to tell? Who has an experience? Who has, who has something funny that happened to them, or something embarrassing, or something sad, a tragedy, or just tell us a story.
Yeah.
And everyone can take turns telling a little 5-minute story to pass the time and to get to know each other. It brings people together, and then you can collect those stories and be able to tell them in addition to your own stories. There are cultures out there. I was told that somebody told me this story about a place in the world somewhere. I don't remember where it was. It was a small island area. It was like Fiji or somewhere out there. And I'm saying Fiji not just off the top of my head. The person who told this story had spent many years in Fiji, so I think it was in that area. And he told this story about how that culture at that time, this was probably 30 years ago, but at that time, it was still incredibly common for adult men to sit around a campfire at night and take turns telling a story. In fact, it was like a competition in that culture. If there were 6 people there, everyone would tell a story, and then they would, based on the applause and the yay at the end, they would judge kind of unofficially who had the best story. Yeah. And even if they didn't have a story of their own, they would just tell a commonly known story. So they would just tell a story of a battle that happened in history, or a story from the Bible. I'm going to talk about David and Goliath. Everyone knows David and Goliath, but not the way I tell it.
Yeah.
And they would each try to outdo each other, not in how good the story is, but how well the story is told.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Imagine the quality of storytellers there must be. Or people would recite poems. If they didn't have a story, they would recite poems, and people would judge how good they were and how much emotion they had. And that is just, outside of, Shakespearean plays and Broadway and, actors, that ability to tell a story, a monologue, and just arouse emotion is underappreciated in everyday life.
It is. It is. But
something we want to focus on.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because the basis of storytelling comes from an individual.
Yeah.
People write books on history and stuff, but that has nothing to do with the individual.
No, it has to be personal.
It has to be
personality of the person telling it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everybody tells a story in a different way, because of emotion, circumstance, status in life. It can be the same basic story, but it's going to be told in a different way by every single person that tells it. And so it's like family heritage. Who in the outside world is going to tell you about your family heritage? Nobody. the family heritage comes down from grandpa, great grandpa, great great grandpa, great 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 grandpa. That's where the stories come from.
Do you think stories have been lost in your family because
it's
storytelling kind of went out of vogue once radio and TV came up? Even when you were a child,
yep.
Maybe you lost out on some stories.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the same with my family. For example, my grandfather's father, his name, I don't know his name. I don't remember. I don't know what his first and last name were. But everyone, including his own children, called him Murdoch.
Yeah.
My grandpa does not even remember why, but for whatever reason, everyone in the community, including his own kids, as children, they didn't call him Dad. They called him Murdoch. His wife called him Murdoch. Was not his name.
Yeah.
Why? I have no clue. There's a story there that was lost. So I'm hoping next time I go back home, I'm going to drill my grandparents.
See if you can figure out why.
Cut through the years of senility until hopefully I could mine a really fascinating story that I want to hold that would be precious to me, not just so I can use, like publish it, nothing like that. Yeah. Just something special to me, like wow, this guy that I never even had a prayer to meet, right? Great grandfather. Like, why on earth did he have such a name? And he was known in the community. He was a known figure in the small town where they lived. It's amazing.
Yeah, and when I look, my aunt wrote a book many years ago about our family heritage. Like I know the year that my ancestors landed in North America.
Landed on Earth from Mars.
On Earth from Mars. I know when they did that. And then there's all, in this little book, there are all these little stories and events that happened in my family that got them to where we are today. But I want to know more.
Yeah, it's not enough.
I had a great uncle or whatever he was. I imagine he'd be like a great uncle, who was in the forest in Kelowna, British Columbia, and was out hunting and died in the bush. They never found him till spring.
Wow.
So, like, what's the story behind that, right?
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people won't know where Kelowna is, but I didn't know that we owned like half of the land in that spot before half of them went back to the U.S. and half of them went south to Saskatchewan. So, like, there are stories, so many stories that are untold. And so basically, with my brothers and my sisters, once we're gone, the stories of our life are going to be gone. They will be non-existent because we're basically the only ones that tell stories now.
Yeah.
Our children and our grandchildren don't really pick up on those kinds of things, you know?
We got to make a change. Start a revolution.
We got to make a change.
Storytelling.
We got to start storytelling.
Well, we'll see if we're able to do that.
Yeah.
But just bringing it back down just to us now with this channel, wanting to develop those skills. There's a couple of things we plan to do. Obviously, just rambling on and telling stories and talking about things will be a part of the Backroom show, like it already has been. Like what we're doing now, that'll continue. We talked last week about how we almost killed this show. We're over it. We're back to just doing what we're doing.
This is just it.
This is it. It doesn't get any better.
As insane as it's going to be.
This doesn't get any better than this. This is it. But on the same channel, we do want to do a few things that are different, wrapped specifically around storytelling, oral storytelling, and around even public speaking, which is sort of like a subsidiary skill that you have to develop in order to be a better oral storyteller. And so there's a couple of different, I'm not going to call them shows or regular weekly programs. I don't think we're going to have that kind of consistency. It'll just be when they come up, we'll do them, right?
Yeah.
So one thing we want to do is we want to have an occasional recurring show called Let Me Tell You a Story. And we'll take turns. It'll be either me or him. And basically, we'll probably both be in the room. I think we decided that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think we're going to be both in the room,
right?
yeah.
Unless for some reason we can't be, and that's fine. But it'll be similar to what we're doing here, except the one person will be doing most of the talking, and the other will be there just to kind of ask questions and just kind of respond, ooh and ah, or whatever, right? Probably more than that, but whatever. And basically, it would be, we would take turns. If it's my turn, my show, I would be telling a personal story to you, to the audience, to the camera, to the microphone, working on practicing the skill of telling a story. And if that takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 2 hours, I doubt 2 hours, but however long it takes, it takes. And then if it's Jonathan's turn, then he would be doing the same thing. You would tell a story. Like, what kinds of stories? We talked about your poems.
Yep.
And the stories behind them.
Yep.
A lot of your stories for the Let Me Tell You a Story segment would be probably that. Probably also some family stories. I think we'd all love to hear that, even if it doesn't have a poem attached to it yet. Yeah. I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
We might do joint storytelling, maybe even here on the show or separate, about shared experiences, things that we do together. Could be great. And so that's one thing. Another thing that's not specific to storytelling, but is specific to public speaking, is we want to do another kind of occasionally recurring segment. Just as we have something to say, we'll do it. We won't put a pressure on ourselves to do something weekly other than the Backroom Show. And that is, we're going to call it keynotes.
Right.
And so like a keynote, like a talk, a public talk that's given, at a seminar, at a university, a person who's a speaker, a motivational speaker, an instructional speaker. You can think of it like TED Talks, where we give a single keynote or even a series of keynotes over time about a certain topic. We're not necessarily telling a story, although there might be anecdotes included, but it's more us telling something that we know about, that we want to practice just teaching and instructing and, giving out that information, verbally, right? Yeah. So we each have some things in mind that we want to talk about, things that we happen to know about. So we're structuring out how that keynote or those keynotes would work. Again, most of the time, most likely, it'll be both of us together in the room. But if it's my keynote, I would be doing the talking, and Jonathan would be doing the support or asking questions, clarifying questions, whatever. And if it's Jonathan's keynote, he would be doing most of the talking, and I would just be doing the support questions and etc. So those are two separate things. So Let Me Tell You a Story and keynotes that we want to do, again, not a regular recurring weekly thing. No. If I do a group of keynotes, for example, then maybe we do one a week for however many weeks until they're out. But there wouldn't be any pressure to do, we just do whatever, right? Yeah. We do have a couple other things on the books, something that involves art, visual art, and poetry that we'll be talking about later. I hope that we're able to get that off the ground pretty soon. That's going to be really great. And what else?
Yeah, very excited about that.
I guess that's it. That's right now on the books.
Yeah, I think right now that's pretty much what we're thinking about doing. Yeah. So we do have some projects in mind, and very excited about the storytelling. That's just going to be amazing. Because there's just so many experiences, and there's just so many things that we can tell our stories about. And like you said, individually or together.
Absolutely.
Because you and I've done a lot together with our wives and with each other. So, we've got that to do. And then there's the business side of it, the keynotes that, I have a little, a plan in mind that I would like to help new graduates out. So my keynotes will be based on that. And, other different topics like that.
Yeah. And, this show is very just a variety show, very general. We phrase it as two writers talking about life. And, if we get to the keynotes and it happens to be a topic you're not interested in, that's fine. There will be somebody who's interested in those particular topics. If you're just here for the general stuff, the stories, the more sort of entertaining stuff, and you don't want to learn something, that's fine too. I know for me personally, though, I watch a lot of TED Talks. YouTube knows this because they keep showing them to me on the homepage. But,
there you go.
I watch a lot of TED Talks about a variety of topics just because, I like to kind of dabble and learn just different things. It's interesting to hear somebody who's an engineer or a computer scientist talk about experiments they've done with artificial intelligence. And it's not like I'm going to go out and become a computer engineer now, but it's just interesting to hear someone who is one of the top people in their field talk about the exciting things they're doing. That's exciting. So if we're talking about something regarding a business or education or whatever, and you're like, I'm not interested in that, give it a try. And if you don't like it, that's fine, right? Yeah. There'll be stories and poems and just more sort of general fun storytelling stuff that we'll be doing plenty of as well.
Absolutely.
All right, great. I think we have we have ground this train as long as we can.
There you go.
So let's call it quits.
Wrap it up.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
The day. Great. I'm looking forward to our future projects. Going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Jacob Patrick.
And Jonathan Graves Wright.
We'll catch you next time.
Next time.
Bye.